So outside power lines have magnetic fields because they separate the conductors because they're not insulated to save money, and also because there's a lot of heat generated, so the insulation gets destroyed. So they leave them bare, so they separate them so the wind doesn't knock them together. But you lose your cancellation, so that's why you have magnetic fields coming down on the property underneath them. It depends on the current, the amount of current. Secondly, you have 3 more sources. That's the first source. The other 3 sources are in the house. Wiring errors, I've already explained that. Current on water pipes, I touched on that as well. You can have that running right underneath your floor. And so we put a piece of plastic in the water pipe out near the street or near the house, in front of the house here in Southern California. And we want to keep the house in code, but also that's done anyway here in many parts of Southern California. And I said to the electricians and the plumbers in the water department, why do you do this? It's not for health, I know that. So they told me it's to keep the stray current off the pipes, because when current runs on that pipe, it sets up electrolysis, because the copper has one potential and the salts of the earth have another potential. And in the days when we watered our lawns, and most Southern Californians overwater their lawns before the drought came on, there's this pitting and corrosion and little pinhole leaks. So over the decades, the water pressure drops on all these yards, underground. You don't even know it. So to prevent that, they get the current off the pipe, which helps with the magnetic fields. Another source is transformers and motors. These are point sources of magnetic fields, which are very strong, very compact, very high, close to the source, like the refrigerator of the motor of a refrigerator. So you don't want to have a bed or chair on the other side of the wall from that. But it drops off within 2-3 feet. And then also the transformers that are plugged into a surge protector, this nest of transformers at your feet under the desk, at your computer desk. We just tell people to move that 2-3 feet away, and then they're fine. So you measure this with a Gauss meter. Now, electric fields are the other type of EMF, and they're actually the most common, and they're the most unknown. So again, remember that the electric field and magnetic field are independent. You can have magnetic fields that are very strong without any electric fields, or you can have electric fields very strong without magnetic fields. They're totally independent at the frequency of house wiring, 60 cycles per second. So the electric fields come from voltage. The magnetic fields come from current. So the difference is turning on a spigot for a garden hose pressurizes the garden hose with 80 pounds of pressure up to the end where the nozzle is. That's like turning on the breaker. Now you have 120 volts to the outlet. You plug in a lamp, it's like adding another length of hose, and you haven't turned on the light, so there's potential. There's 120 volts of pressure up to that light switch. There's 80 pounds of pressure up to the nozzle in the water hose. When you squeeze that nozzle, the water comes out because of the pressure. That's current flow. When you turn on the light, now the electrons flow through, and the only difference is you have a return path instead of just one way for the water. But when you let go of that nozzle, everyone has had the experience, or most everyone, of feeling the kick in their hand of the pressure right there. In the same way, when you turn the light off, that 120 volts is still in that cord, and this pressure, this voltage, whether you have current or not, is there up to the switch in a plastic cord and in the plastic Romex circuits in your wall, and there's an electric field that comes out 6 feet and recedes and expands and collapses and expands and collapses 120 times a second, because the sine wave has 2 phases. So here's the 0 point, so you have goes up to 60 hertz and down to 0, 60 hertz and up to 0, 60 hertz. It's positive, negative. That's what Tesla did with Edison 100 years ago. He converted DC to AC. The whole history of that, but Tesla prevailed, and Edison relented and said, yes, you're right, this solves that problem of not having our current go more than 2 blocks before it degrades with DC. So he converted over to AC, and that's Tesla's contribution. The problem is it's not healthy for people, okay, but it's good for the grid. We can get our voltage for hundreds of miles. So the problem is you have this field expanding out and collapsing and expanding out, but the polarity varies or alternates. So 6 feet, 8 feet for that field. You're and we have this right now. We have cords right around us. Everyone does. But if you're laying in bed trying to sleep with the head of your bed against the wall, and there's a plastic Romex circuit right there, here's your head, and here's the Romex wire right here. And then you have an end table, maybe a wall here, or an end table with a lamp cord. So within 6 feet, you have these cords, each of which is expanding, producing this electric field that's invisible, but we can measure it. And it collapses and it expands and collapses. When that happens, the cells are affected on the molecular level and the atomic level and subatomic level. Charged particles are either attracted or repulsed depending on the polarity of that field. And it comes from multiple directions if you have multiple cords around you. So there's this jostling, agitating effect or influence on charged particles, these ions, calcium ions, potassium ions, sodium ions for the membrane and the mitochondria, and even the electrons and protons within each cell, within each atom. So the net effect is two things. Number one, you don't produce melatonin. You don't release the melatonin that your pineal gland has produced. There should be a rise in the blood serum melatonin level through the overnight. Well, that's blunted in the presence of these fields. And number two, over the span of 8 hours of sleep, you'll go through 4 or 5 sleep cycles where you'll go from stage 1 to stage 4 and back to stage 1 again, and that takes about an hour and 15 minutes, and then you have 15 minutes of dreaming, and that's one cycle. Then you do it over again. But the amount of time you spend here in stage 4 determines how rested and refreshed you feel in the morning when you wake up.
Sure.
Okay, so in our modern society, we don't do that as much because we have these electric fields in our sleeping environments. So for my clients, and I've done several thousand home evaluations, and you can see on my website under comments from clients, people say, I sleep better. I awaken more refreshed. I'm not awakening as often through the night. I'm sleeping longer and deeper. And then certain health symptoms start to clear up, from allergies to brain fog, learning difficulties, sinus problems. All of these things begin to improve if that's the cause. And other people just say, I just feel better. I have more energy. So our goal is to create a zone that is free of electric fields, magnetic fields, radio frequencies, and dirty electricity in the sleeping environment. That's the first thing we do. And then from there, we extrapolate into the rest of the house, especially for electrically sensitive people, and create a zone that's reduced, that has reduced fields in these other areas where they sit and stand. It's not possible to get rid of electric fields in the daytime because you need electricity, but you can minimize them with certain techniques that we do. But nighttime is really important.